I think we are live. Hello, everyone. Uh, hello, everyone. My name is Aquibur Rahman. I'm the founder and CEO of MailModo. Today, we are going to talk about the new policies from Google and Yahoo regarding email deliverability. And we have none other than Lauren Meyer, who is a dear friend and as well as who has been an expert in email deliverability. And we have done several sessions with her before as well, talking about email deliverability and helping people improve their spam rate and overall email performance. And Lauren has 17 years of experience in the email industry. She's currently as the CMO of Socket Labs, but she has also worked at companies like Mailchimp and Kickbox before. Thank you, Lauren, for being with us today and educating us about the new policies.
Yeah, I will do my best. And yeah, I appreciate the invitation. It's nice to see you again and partner up on something.
Yeah, and so for our audience, who most of you already know that from 1st of February, Google and Yahoo have launched few new policies which can affect your email deliverability, and we are and there are certain nuances that we are going to talk during this call and ask Lauren about more about it. But before we go into the exact policy, Lauren, I would like to know from you why these policies, why suddenly these new policies are coming, what would be the future impact from this.
Yeah, so I think there are several reasons for this change. So I think if you look at Gmail alone, it has about a 28% market share globally. So that's about 1.8 billion users worldwide. Yet I would say I've heard from the postmasters that about 90% of what Google receives on any given day is rejected at the front door. They don't let it into their servers. And we're talking about really bad spam here, malware, fraud, phishing, or something else that's really not safe for recipients to use. In fact, they don't even want to know that it exists in most cases. So naturally, Google really wants to protect that almost 2 billion users from those unwanted messages. But with AI, it's making it so much easier for bad actors to send bad mail at scale. And it's much more sophisticated than it was in the past. It's harder for the mailbox providers to catch, and it's easier for recipients to fall for, which of course is not what any of us want. These kind of new requirements are meant to kind of really help the mailbox providers combat this growing problem of spam and phish and keep their users safe, which is their number one primary goal, which is immediately followed by providing their users with a really enjoyable inbox experience. A Gmail user, Google does not want Gmail users going over to Yahoo users or some other platform. They want to keep them super happy where they are. And the intention here with these changes is to spend less time reviewing non-compliant mail and to also improve that recipient experience with the inbox. And it's going to help them, the mailbox providers, spend a lot more time helping good senders reach the inbox. The postmaster from Yahoo, I did a webinar with her for Litmus a couple weeks ago, and she had actually mentioned, I get a ton of tickets every single day. And this will allow me to focus on the ones that are compliant, and maybe for the ones that are non-compliant, not to say that she won't respond to those, but those get a lower priority. So it really is helpful to these providers to be able to kind of prioritize the work that they're doing. I would say, though, that these are actually practices that Yahoo and Google have been publicly recommending for many years, which is why I use the air quotes around new. They've really just kind of, realized that making things optional doesn't really work for everyone. There's some people who just don't want to make the change until there's a absolute reason to do it. I think in other cases, there's platforms, there's businesses that are just, they're not focused on email. It's just something that facilitates their business. And they may also be dealing with a ton of technical debt that is just like, oh, this isn't an easy switch for us. This is going to be a massive project. And if they kind of can't justify that versus building, a front end tool, it really becomes very challenging for them.
Yeah, definitely. So, I feel that it is definitely going to be helpful for the user,
Mhm.
uh, because even I, as an individual, get so many emails,
Yeah.
so many unsolicited emails, etc., and I keep doing unsubscribe from those emails, and it's like quite painful. Do you think that because of this, overall industry will change and number of emails, etc., will decrease coming to user inbox?
You know, I actually don't think it's going to change much for the recipients in terms of volume. I mean, year over year, if you look at those statistics, email volume continues to grow. And when they're kind of looking at that, they're really looking at the legitimate mail, right? I mean, that's where 90% of what's rejected is like the bad stuff, but about, 5% of what they get is the legitimate mail. So they're letting that in. They're just doing a better job at making sure that's the only things that the recipients end up seeing.
Got it. So let's understand about the policy more. So who is it applicable for?
Yeah, so there are some requirements that apply for all senders of all volumes, basically anybody who's sending to Gmail accounts or Yahoo accounts. And then there's this a pretty much longer list of requirements for those folks who are sending more than 5,000 messages per day to those users at Gmail and at Hotmail, or excuse me, at Yahoo, not Hotmail. But I feel like you need to really understand that 5,000 per day is really just guidance from these providers. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's not like, okay, well, if you send 4,850 messages, you're not going to apply. It's really not meant to be that specific. I mean, there's different time ranges that they're using for this kind of stuff, and they're not going to share those with senders because then we could abuse those. So, they're going to be looking at a variety of things, such as, whether or not you are sending the same content to multiple recipients versus, just sending one-to-one correspondence. So if you're sending transactional mail, but at scale, much more than 5,000, you will have to kind of, abide by these rules. But it just comes down to, are you sending this mass email? Are we seeing this sent to a whole bunch of people? If so, the chances of you being kind of caught up in that bulk sender labeling is going to be very real. And I think that's, folks get really caught up on this volume, right? It's really just safer to apply these practices to all of your mail streams now, because this is really, it's about ensuring that recipients, those Gmail and Yahoo users, and really like the ecosystem as a whole has a great experience with email. And, the point of these changes is to protect those users from malicious emails. Yes, there are legitimate emails that are going to get caught up in that. That's just inevitable, but it's not going to be the mass. I would say, Gmail and Yahoo have done a ton of research. They are very data-driven companies. So you have to believe that they understand the amount of impact that this is going to cause on legitimate mail to recipients.
Yeah. One of the questions that I have seen in one of the communities is that these new policies applicable only for at gmail.com and not for Google Workspace email IDs. Is that correct understanding, or can you put more light on to this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So these new requirements do not affect Google Workspace users specifically, but it's important to kind of remember that there is a spam and abuse policy for Gmail, which is relevant to the Google Workspace users. And this specifically kind of says, when you sign up for a Gmail account, you agree not to use the account to send spam, distribute viruses, or otherwise abuse the service. It says that all users on your domain are subject to these agreements. So, and this is part of their larger Google Workspace acceptable use policy. So it's, again, it doesn't specifically apply to it, but I think the sentiment still remains that you want to be a good email sender, a good email citizen, and send emails that your recipients are expecting to hear and want to receive, that they will find value in.
Yeah. So, can you, for our audience, can you just describe the key highlights of these policies and what should our audience, email marketers and marketers, should know about it?
Yeah. So there are a lot of moving parts to this, and I think everybody joining today knows that. That's why you're here, to get a little bit more help. We definitely don't have time to kind of dig into every little bit of this today. So I really do encourage you to go review those guidelines that have been published by Gmail and Yahoo. Just make sure they actually, Google updated theirs, I think maybe December 23rd, somewhere around there. So if you just kind of caught that original announcement, you may have missed something that's there. And it's not just, we've added requirements. It's actually more, we're getting questions from the community and they're updating their documentation to try to make that clearer based on the feedback that they're getting. So definitely check those out. But basically what this boils down to is mailbox providers are cutting down or attempting to cut down on the amount of spam that reaches their users' inboxes. So a few of the main requirements, I would say the ones that are impacting most users are first, authenticating your mail with either SPF or DKIM. You don't need both, but I do think this is a good idea. So if you must choose, I would say, I recommend implementing DKIM first, but try to get both if you can. That really is the ultimate goal there. You'll also need to have a DMARC record published for all of your sending domains that are used by bulk senders. And that record can be at the organizational domain. So whatever your website is, your top level domain there, or this could be on your subdomain directly. So in some cases, there are folks who already have a DMARC record on that top level domain. And now they're like, wait, oh my gosh, I have to add one for the subdomain. And that's just not the case. If you're already covered, you're already covered, you are good to go. This policy for DMARC needs to be set at a level of P = none, which is not kind of what they call a level of enforcement. And I don't know how deep we want to get into those levels. Maybe we can kind of talk about that later in the session. But for the sake of compliance with these new requirements, you basically just need to have a DMARC record published. There is an alignment requirement where the domain in your from header must be aligned with either the SPF domain that you're using or that DKIM domain. So essentially, this is where recipient systems are looking for alignment of the from address and the sending domain. This is one of the things that is required to pass DMARC alignment for bulk senders. So while all of the messages that Google is requiring, some sort of passing authentication for bulk senders, which is again people that are sending about more than 5,000 per day, some form of authentication must both pass and have that alignment with the from domain. The next one that we want to talk about here is that Google is no longer allowing folks to send from gmail.com addresses. So really what they call this, impersonating Gmail, but really it's just, they're stepping up their policies themselves, right? So they're moving from a P = none policy, that monitoring policy, to P = quarantine. And what this is basically telling the rest of the world is when somebody sends from a gmail.com address to any destination, it doesn't matter if it's Gmail or Yahoo or if it's anybody else in the world, they're saying, if they're not gmail.com, if they're not Gmail, don't deliver that mail. I want you to send it to quarantine, which is the spam folder. So what this means is that any sender who's not Gmail really does need to switch away from that Gmail domain and move to something else. And again, this does not affect Google corporate domains through the workspace. It's just gmail.com. While this move by Google, it may come as a shock, I think, especially to small and medium businesses who've, they've been sending from Gmail addresses for years, right? But I think, it's important to kind of point out that, Yahoo actually has been using this P = quarantine enforcement policy with DMARC for years. I want to say it goes back to maybe like 2016, 2017. So really Gmail is kind of just catching up here and trying to help make the internet a safer place. So I think that's a really important one. It really only affects people who are Gmail users. So I don't know if we've got a lot of those folks joining today. I'm happy to kind of dig into the options that are available there. But for the sake of this summary, I guess we can kind of move on for now. Another one that I know folks have had a lot of questions about, and even I had to do a bunch of research to really kind of make sure that I was up on what we need to do here, is implementing a one-click unsubscribe. And really the goal here is making it easier for recipients to unsubscribe in just one click. And I want to make a note that this has nothing to do with the unsubscribe link that's within the body of your email. This is all about having a one-click unsubscribe mechanism within the headers of your email. And I also want to note that, your ESP may be able to help you with this implementation depending on how you're set up. But for other folks, maybe folks who are sending through API or SMTP, there's lots of kind of edge cases where they may not be able to do this for you. So check with your ESP first to be sure, see what's available there. But be prepared that this may be something that you do have to figure out yourself, which essentially means adding some additional information into the headers of the email at the point when you send. So typically you might need some help from IT or from your dev team, but it really is just kind of adding in this extra information into your headers. The good news with this one is that you technically have until June to get this in place and working. I have heard instances where senders saw improvements in their deliverability and in like the performance downstream from that after adding this recently. Imagine if you're making it easier for your recipients to unsubscribe. If it's just one click, it's much less likely that they're going to mark your email as spam to kind of just get it out of their view, right? So, keep in mind, it doesn't matter if recipients have signed up for the mail that you're sending or not. If they think it's spam, if they think it's just a nuisance, if they just want to get it out of their face, they're going to mark it as spam because it's easier. And so this one-click unsubscribe actually makes the unsubscribe option just as easy as clicking spam, which is a great thing. Which brings me to the major point that I think a lot of other folks are really a bit nervous about, especially if complaints are high, is really we need to keep spam votes always below a rate of 0.3%. And really what they want you to keep it below is a rate of 0.1%. And I know that sounds low, one complaint per 1,000 messages, but it's what they're requiring. And they have some information to confirm that it's actually quite easy. Most legitimate senders that are sending mail to their platforms consistently stay below that 0.1 rate. Let's see. I think that's probably the gist of it for the high level stuff here.
Yeah, I will summarize it again for our audience. So you have talked about three main points. Number one is the authentication, either have SPF or DKIM, but you also need to have DMARC now. Most of the brands I have seen, they have SPF and DKIM, but they don't have DMARC. So DMARC is an important new policy which every brand should have before they are sending emails to authenticate the email. Second, you talked about the one click and subscribe. I will come to that more, but I'm more interested into digging deeper into the spam complaints, which is
Let's do it.
common for most of the brands.
For sure.
So, so it says that your spam complaint should be less than 0.1%,
Yeah.
and on any rate should not be more than 0.3%.
Mhm.
So, can you elaborate first, like how does Google and Yahoo calculate a spam complaint? What is a spam complaint actually, and how can our audience and our brands prevent that?
Yeah. So how they're calculating the spam complaint is literally anytime someone takes an action to mark a message as spam, or
Yeah.
if they take that message and they drag it from their inbox over to their spam or junk folder. So that's what they're doing there. They're really looking at just how many people are marking this as spam. And Yahoo actually makes this pretty easy to monitor complaints because they offer what we call the complaint feedback loop. So this means that anytime somebody does mark your mail as spam, you're informed about the specific recipients who've done that so that you can then suppress them from your future mailings. And this feedback shows up directly within the spam percentage within your ESP reporting. So it's really easy to kind of get that trend line and be like, ooh, things are getting worse. We've got some spikes of spam. What's going on here? On the other side of the fence, we've got Gmail. They make measuring complaints a bit more challenging because they don't offer that complaint feedback loop like Yahoo does. So they're not telling you specifically which recipients have marked your emails as spam. So the best way to monitor complaint rates within Gmail is to track them within Google Postmaster tools. Perhaps we can drop a link to where folks can sign up for Google Postmaster tools in the chat if they're not doing that. This is something you have to be the domain owner in order to be able to sign up. But the process is actually very straightforward once you get in there. So it's just, there's a nice big button that says add it. And then there's just a couple of very basic steps that you have to follow. And then once you get in there, there's actually a good amount of information. Like they've got a couple of different categories, and the spam rate is one of them. So then you can see on a graph the days that you had some spikes in complaints, and they'll show you specifically kind of what those rates look like. So you can kind of get that trend line of how things are looking. One thing to note, I think, especially with Google Postmaster tools, is there are times when folks get really freaked out. They see a really big spike, right? Like I've seen very legitimate senders, very good senders that are on our Socket Labs platform that sometimes get a spike of like 0.4 or 0.6. And you're like, oh my God, what did they do? They must be hacked. Oh boy, this is bad. And you look in and it's actually just a day that they sent very low volume. but
Yeah.
had a lot of complaints that kind of maybe carried over from the day before. So that's where there's been tons of people asking questions about this within all the Slack channels and all the places online. Not to say Google and Yahoo aren't going to answer it; they're just being cagey. But they cannot give away the secret sauce of the different timelines of when things are happening. So I would say, just like with every metric that you are kind of monitoring for email performance, use those spam complaints as like with a grain of salt. Like look into it. If you see a spike, look into it for sure. But don't freak out until you're like, oh my gosh, this is okay, we didn't send on that day, or we sent a very small volume. But I think it's a great tool for really getting an idea, specifically from Gmail, how they're feeling about you as a sender. Within that category, they've got the ability to look at your reputation as viewed through them as well. So figure it's like you've got like high, medium, low, and poor. But yeah, so I think you put all of those pieces together, and it really gives you a really good understanding of your spam complaints. And one other thing I'll kind of point out when it comes to monitoring is you can actually sort of notice if you've got complaint issues, and maybe if you're going to the spam folder, by looking at your open rates as well as your complaint rates. Because there's times where people are like, my complaint rate's 0, woo, woo, woo. Like I'm super excited. And then you go and you look at their open rates, and it turns out their open rates are like 3%. And that's that's a very clear indication that you're probably going to spam, or you're sending to a terrible list, right? But like you're probably going to spam, and figure if somebody is already seeing mail in the spam folder, they can't mark it as spam because it's already spam, So I think that's one of the tricks there.
Yeah, so I have taken a few points from what you said. Number one is that if even like if all your emails are going to spam already, your spam complaints are going to be almost zero because nobody is actually opening your emails. So even though spam complaints are less than 0.1, it does you still have to look at your other metrics, open rate, engagement, etc.
Yeah.
So that's one. Second, you mentioned about the overflow of spam data from one day to another.
Mm-hmm.
So I have also seen some of the clients mentioning that, hey, I sent emails on Monday, but I didn't send any emails on Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. But I see there's a huge number of spam complaints on like percentage in on Tuesday and Wednesday. So
Yeah.
how is that happening? So like uh, so can you elaborate more on that? Like how does Google Postmaster actually show the spam complaints? Like even though there is no email being sent on Tuesday and Wednesday,
Yeah.
can they show spam complaints?
Yeah. So, I mean, figure, anybody who's looked closely at their data probably sees that there's, this, once you hit send, there's a big old spike of opens. There's tons of people that are engaging within the first hour, the first couple of hours. But then there's this kind of really long tail of folks who still do open the mail, the next day, the day after, 3 weeks later, right? And they have the ability to still kind of mark those messages as spam at any point. So I think that's where all of us marketers are like, oh, they marked it as spam, or they didn't directly after we've hit send. But so I think you need to kind of really just give yourself that grace of like, if I didn't send, this isn't the worst problem ever. It's just something to be aware of. I think the bigger thing is if you are seeing complaints that are kind of bubbling over to the next couple of days, like that you sent on Monday. So go take a look at Monday's mailing. Like, do you see high unsubscribes as well? Do you see like, do you see other signals that indicate that people are reacting negatively to that mail versus positively? I think that's helpful.
Got it. And let's say if there's a brand whose spam complaints are high, like consistently high, like 0.5%,
Yep.
something, what do they really need to do? What do they need to change?
Yeah. So I think, there are a lot of ways to reduce your spam complaints, which I think is the best part about this. But it really, which ones are going to be the most effective for each sender really comes down to what your business model is and what you have been doing with email up until now, right? Like if you've been building a list without getting permission first, that is going to impact your list quality. And that could make people more likely to hit, mark your mail as complaints. If people signed up, but they signed up to hear from you weekly, that's the cadence that you told them about, and now all of a sudden you're sending daily, or you've changed the type of content that you're sending, like they're like, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up for, like this is not going to work, right? So I think it really comes down to that. But I think suggestions for ways you can improve that spam rate include, well, getting permission first. I would say that's the biggest one. That's the most important one, really. Sorry, guys, I know you're rolling your eyes right now. I appreciate that, but it really is super important. And then once you get that sign up, you do want to set really clear expectations about the kinds of emails they're going to send from you, or that they're going to receive from you. And then again, stick to those things that you promise, because you don't want to do that. Those changes in behavior can sometimes trigger very happy customers or dormant ones who kind of went silent on you and don't really engage at all, to start engaging negatively in the form of that spam complaint. So that's going to be a problem for you. Another thing you could do is consider if different types of email or content are being sent on the days when your complaint rates spike, right? So we talked about this a little bit, but really dig into those. Like, what, do you have a very vague or an overly aggressive subject line that's getting people to open the mail, but then they don't like what they see in that email, right? So imagine if you're like, free offer, and then they get inside and they realize it's free with a purchase. You're setting them up for being angry at you, right? So make sure that your subject lines are specific to what they're going to see inside, but also factual. Don't trick people into getting opens, because you have to remember that they could react negatively downstream from that. And spam complaints are super damaging to your deliverability. Another thing I've seen people have success with is moving your unsubscribe link to the top of the body of your email instead of kind of hiding it in the footer, as all of us marketers like to do. The point here is you want to make it much easier for folks to find. So if they open that mail, even if they're angry, maybe they'll just click unsubscribe from you because they do trust your brand, instead of hitting spam. And then, of course, we've got, kind of under the same umbrella of unsubscribe, implementing that one-click unsubscribe is really going to help with people marking as spam, right? Because it makes it so much easier for recipients to do that. And they don't even have to open the email to unsubscribe at this point. The beauty of that one-click unsubscribe is it shows up. So if you do open the mail, there's a blue button right next to your from address that says unsubscribe. So you could click on that. But even if you're just looking at your full mailbox, if you kind of hover over one line of a message of a subject line, to the right of that, you're going to see an unsubscribe button as well. So it's like, oh, here's the message. Here's the from. I don't really like this subject line. I'm sick of this mail. Boom, unsubscribe. So it's actually just kind of right in the flow, which has been super helpful. And I think, most senders are already working on this. So bravo, keep it up. The sooner you implement that, the better. I would say also avoid sending to addresses that you haven't contacted in a while. I understand it's like, oh, maybe we can get those back. But there is a lot of evidence to show that mailing people that you haven't contacted in a while, it's just, they're confused by it. They're annoyed by it. They forgot they signed up or forgot who you were completely. So, the actual time frame is going to depend on your business model again, or the types of emails you're sending, the expectations you've set. But generally speaking, if a recipient hasn't heard from you in the last couple of months, at the very least, they're going to forget that they signed up or forget you entirely. So you really do need to kind of stay top of mind by having a fairly regular sending frequency, right? Even if that's monthly or weekly, just something to kind of get you there. It's going to be good.
Got it. Very interesting points, Lauren. I will just summarize again. So you first mentioned that set up right expectations with the users. Second was don't mislead them or don't make them angry. Third, I think is very important that make the unsubscribe link visible on the top. I see most of the brands still have a very tiny, teeny unsubscribe link in the bottom of the page, which
Yeah.
which has a gray font or a gray background. So not to do that. Not to send unsolicited emails to old users or non-opt-in users. Do you also recommend to have a double opt-in or something to make sure that only those people get emails who have really asked for it?
Yeah, I think I'm torn on double opt-in, because the marketer in me understands that makes it harder for people to sign up. So your list size is going to be impacted by that. But the double opt-in does get people to actually confirm, yeah, this is my correct address, and I do want to receive mail from you. That's really important. So I think there's that kind of question in your own mind of like, do I want quality or do I want quantity? But I think it's important when it comes to spam complaints to realize, even if someone has double opted in and you've got the right Lauren and everything's going well, again, if you trick me, if you send mail that I don't find value in, any of those things can cause me to mark your mail as spam. And the trick is like there's a million reasons, right? My kids pissed me off 10 minutes ago. I'm tired. I'm cranky. I don't like your brand because you just signed a deal with a celebrity that I don't like. Like there's all these things that are unrelated to email, in
Yeah.
addition to the actual things that you may have triggered in them. So it's just, you're never going to know what that reason is, but you can look to your different metrics and put that piece together, right? Did you get them to open? Nice job. Did you get them to click, suggesting they liked what they saw? Great. Are you seeing high unsubscribes? So even if you don't see high complaints, that negative sentiment is still there. People are just like, ew, I don't want this, right? And they're getting off the list.
Yeah. And what happens if the spam complaints is over 0.1% or even 0.3%? And let's say if it is happening consistently to a brand, what would happen after that?
Yeah, so I think Yahoo and Google have kind of gone on record about this just a little bit. So I would, they have confirmed that the majority of reputable senders have complaint rates that stay very far below the 0.01 kind of percentage there. What's going to happen if you kind of are hovering around 0.1 is they're going to start deferring some of your mail. So that's like a temporary kind of like try again later, right? So they're requiring you to continue trying to deliver that mail. They're accepting a slower rate from you. So usually that mail will ultimately get delivered because your ESP is retrying that message for you automatically. But if you're paying attention, you might notice that you hit send in the morning and that mail didn't get delivered until the afternoon. So that's kind of how they're going to be starting and figure those deferral messages are getting to be pretty specific. So if it is a complaint issue, if it's, a DMARC alignment issue, they're going to tell you that. And it is just, this transient temporary bounce kind of failure. And a lot of ESPs don't share that information, right? That's something that kind of stays internal. But if you do have access to it, like at Socket Labs, we include deferred events within the logs that we share within our UI. So like if you're paying attention to that, you'll be able to kind of catch that very quickly. Another way that you could do that is maybe, just seed your messages, like send it to yourself as well. See when it lands. Does it land very quickly or does it take a very long time for you to receive that? Once you start to kind of go past that 0.1% mark, if you're getting spikes that are 0.3, mailbox provider, they're not mean guys, right? They're trying to be supportive of good senders. So if you just have one spike every once in a while, that's not really a problem. And again, figure sometimes those spikes are coming from variance in volumes and things like that, right? So they're not trying to punish you there. They're factoring lots of different things into their filtering decisions. So part of it is sender reputation. Part of it is recipient reaction. There's all these things, the authentication, all this stuff. So they're looking at everything and they're saying, okay, well, they had a spike. Maybe today we'll send some of their mail to the spam folder, but we're really not going to damage them. But if you're consistently kind of reaching or exceeding that level when you're sending higher volumes, they're going to start blocking your mail. That is going to be the result that you can kind of see. So I would just really keep the complaints low. Like my recommendation, I've been doing this for 17 years. And so I've seen a lot of folks who have lower complaint rates. So like if you want consistent inbox placement, try to keep it below like 0.03, not 0.3, 0.03. I know that sounds small, but that is just that is a very clear indication that you have a healthy list and that folks are engaged with the mail that you're sending and they're at least okay with it, if not actually really enjoy it.
Yeah, got it. And Lauren, what happens, let's say, if a brand is being penalized by Google and Yahoo, how
Mhm.
can they fix? Let's say there was an intern who sent some bad emails
Mhm.
and now the CMO wants to fix it. What can they do about it?
Yeah. Well, first, obviously, fire the intern, right? No, I'm just kidding. Of course, don't fire the intern. In fact, don't blame them for anything they've done. They're new, and it's actually on you as the marketer for letting them do things that could be damaging. But, the good thing with complaints is if you fix the underlying problems that are causing it, they go away and your deliverability gets better. And that's, again, these mailbox providers are looking at so much data, like in some cases, hundreds of data points, right? So if you're doing most things right, like if you've got your authentication set up, if you have the one-click unsubscribe, if you have, there's all these little chips that are kind of leading in your favor. So, continue sending, but send good mail, right? If you've got a list that wasn't built through permission, maybe trash it, maybe throw it away, or very much lower the volume that you're sending. Send very targeted messages that are very relevant to the person you're sending, instead of kind of more of that spray and pray kind of effect. We went through the list of things you can do to reduce your complaint rates. Stick to that list. That is the way to do it, right? If you do end up getting blocked at Yahoo or at Gmail, you can file a ticket with them, or you're probably going to go to your support team with your ESP, and then your ESP will file a ticket for you. But tell these folks what happened, right? If it is like, hey, we've built our list through double opt-in, we tend to see really high engagement, we have low complaints, like make the case, and then say, oops, by the way, we sent to a suppression list by accident. Like, we're not intending to send spam. We made a mistake. And so oftentimes these folks, like, they're humans too, right? Like, I actually know the postmaster from Yahoo, and she's a wonderful person. She understands that mistakes happen. Mistakes happen to everybody, right? So it's just, are you making a mistake, or are you pretending you're making a mistake when you're actually just trying to send mail that you shouldn't be sending to people you shouldn't be sending to?
Yeah. So you mentioned that we can raise a ticket to Google and Yahoo. So there a way to raise the ticket? Like, where can they raise the ticket?
Yeah, so I can share links. I don't have the links handy with me to be able to share them directly. So unless Muncie can find those and share them, great. But and again, this is something that for a lot of you tuning in, you're probably going to reach out to your ESP support team, and they will do this for you, because they do this all the time. This is kind of part of their job. But when you're filing that ticket, you're basically giving a bunch of information. Some of the stuff I just mentioned, they're going to ask you where you get signups, what's going on, what's the domain, what's the IP you're sending from, and you have a chance to kind of make your case. And so Yahoo will respond. You might get a form response to start, but you will get a response from a human, and they'll take action. Gmail famously does not respond to tickets, which is fine though, because I have seen that when you file tickets, if you're deserving, in some cases, you will see the delivery change after that. You will see improvement. I think the trick is, mailbox providers say this, deliverability people say this, you get the deliverability you deserve. So if you're all set up, if you've got your authentication in place, if you're showing them who you are, but you're kind of, you're that guy at the bar who's just hitting on everyone, they're going to notice that behavior, and they're going to treat you accordingly.
Yeah. Moving on from spam complaints, so you talked about unsubscribe links, and so the one there's one on the ESP that they need to add the list unsubscribe in the header,
Yeah.
and there's also on the sender to have a unsubscribe link in the email itself.
Yeah.
So how do people how can brand owners, marketers can check if their ESP has list and subscribe, or the other policies like TLS, encryption, or all the other policies that Google and Yahoo is enforcing? So is there a way that brands can check if their ESP is compliant with all of these policies?
Yeah, so I think the first step would be send an email and see what it looks like, right? There's ways that you can check. So usually it's kind of show original is sort of the option you're looking for, but you can actually look at the email headers. Prepare yourself. It's a lot of data that you will not understand or care about. But if you do like a control find function and search for SPF, search for DKIM, search for DMARC, you will see like SPF equals pass or SPF equals fail. So like that's a start for the authentication piece. When you send that email figure, you're also going to be able to tell very quickly if you have the one-click unsubscribe set up properly and if it's showing, because you're going to be able to see directly within your mailbox that pretty little blue unsubscribe link, right? So like that's how you'll know. In some cases, there are times where folks set it up and they don't immediately see it. So figure there is some time that it takes for this to kind of propagate within the systems. There also is a reputation aspect to that. So if you're not seeing the one-click unsubscribe, double check your reputation, because it's not going to show up if they don't have enough trust in you to take that information on the unsubscribe and do the right thing. They're like, you're a spammer. We're not going to give you the benefits that other legitimate senders tend to get. So in terms of a tool, like if you want to check, so check the email. That's the biggest part. Check with your ESP. They are getting a ton of questions about this. So they have standard answers. They know the answers. They've checked with their team, so they may be able to kind of do that diagnosis for you to make sure that you're actually compliant. The other thing that I would recommend is a tool called About My Email. This was built by Steve Atkins from Word to the Wise, if you're familiar with either Steve or with Laura Atkins. This one is Deliverability Geek tested. It showed up in one of my super secret email groups and everybody was raving about it. This is Postmaster approved as well. So Marcel Becker from Yahoo, he's one of the spokespersons, has confirmed that if you're using Steve's tool, if it says you're compliant, then you are compliant. So basically what you do with this tool is you simply just send an email from the production environment of your email program to the address that they kind of give you on the screen. So, once once the tool receives the email that you've sent, it's going to go through it and do many of the basic checks that deliverability folks usually do when they're checking for the technical health of a client's email. And the display that you get, the readout, is a pretty detailed report, but I would say understandable report. It's not giving you a ton of information that's just going to give you a headache. But this includes checks for SPF, for DKIM, for DMARC, for alignment, for TLS, for the presence of a one-click unsubscribe, all these things. So, it's covering a lot of the elements, I think maybe all of the elements of the new requirements. And the great news is this is free to use. It doesn't require you to sign up or anything. You're literally just sending an email to this service and then checking that out. So I think we may have shared a link to that within.
Yeah.
It's
On the comments, we have already shared the link. I feel that this is a very easy way. Thanks, Lauren, for sharing this. So, guys, you can go and send an email to this tool, and they will share the whole report with you.
Yeah.
Lauren, I had one question regarding the unsubscribe link, the blue unsubscribe link that is shown on the top of the email.
Mhm.
I've not seen it every time. But there is I checked the header and there is link unsubscribe, etc. Is it also possible because of the volume of email being sent from that domain?
Yeah, I think that is definitely possible. Like I've seen some cases where people are like, well, it's showing up for this mail stream, it's not showing up for this other one. In some cases, that is going to be reputation based. In other cases, it could just be the fact that you sent from a test account, like you didn't actually send from your production environment. You just kind of sent a test with that content. You really need to send from the place that you're sending your mass emails from.
Got it. One question regarding the ESP part. So, are these policies going to impact ESPs like MailModo or Mailchimp or Klaviyo, etc. as well?
They could. All of these companies, I know for a fact, are working very hard to make sure that they're covering their parts, right? The more technical aspects they're covering, right? Like there's something there's a reverse PTR record, for example. That is something that your ESP would help you with. I think the impact really comes from how all of us ESPs handle compliance of our customers, right? So if we have customers that are sending really poor lists that have poor reputation, that aren't complying with all the requirements, that could start to impact them. Like it definitely will start with the sender specifically, and then maybe not just their marketing mail that's actually causing the bad reputation, but all of their different mail streams. But if you've got enough bad customers at MailModo or anywhere else, that will start to impact you as well.
Got it. I think I'm done with my questions. I see that there are a lot of questions in the comments as well. So
Okay.
we'll pick some of these questions. But before that, if you have anything else, Lauren, to share, any best practices, any tools, anything that will help our audience, that would be great.
Yeah. So I think we all need to acknowledge that the email landscape is evolving very rapidly. I mentioned before that, spam and phishing and these other forms of abuse, they've been bad for a very long time, but they are getting worse. It's really bad. And mailbox providers are having to process all of this mail. And so they don't want to do it, right? They want to reduce their costs. They want to reduce the overhead involved with processing mail that they don't ever want to deliver. So, I think it's really important that we all understand the reason that they're stepping this up is to combat really bad things that are outside of legitimate senders' kind of purview. But they're also saying, hey, legitimate senders, we've told you this stuff for a decade, and many of you did it, but a lot of you didn't. And it's clear that you're not going to until we require you to, right? So they're kind of playing the bad cop at this point. These changes are really about protecting that experience for users. So you want to make sure that you are properly authenticated, and so that you're identifying yourself. Make it easy for users to unsubscribe in every way that you can think of, and then monitor those bulk spam rates as a sender. It's really super important for folks to do this.
Thank you, Lauren. Audience, please feel free to comment your questions. We are going to take few of the questions because of lack of time, but please put your questions. We'll take first question from Shri Vatsala. Uh, does all these changes affect companies using Google Workspace and implement various tools like Outreach, HubSpot, etc.? So I think the question is more about the cold emails or the sales email being sent from tools like Outreach and HubSpot using
Mhm.
Google Workspace.
Yeah. So, it doesn't specifically affect Google Workspace. Like they're not changing anything there, but, and also understand, like much like, hotmail.com is filtered differently than, outlook.com, right? So there are differences, but if you're sending cold email, they're going to be coming after you a little bit. Like keep in mind that mailbox providers they don't know if you've gotten an opt-in. They don't know specifically that it's cold email, but
Mhm.
your stats, the engagement from recipients is going to tattle on you, right? Because you're going to see, maybe they do see high open rates because you're getting people to open that mail, but then they're seeing this negative feedback. They're getting a bunch of spam complaints. They're getting these things that tell them very clearly that the mail is not something that people are expecting to receive. So I think it's, follow your stats, double check everything, but beware, because in some cases they're just going to filter that mail to the spam folder. So you're not going to get a rejection, but you're not going to reach the inbox either. So just, again, keep the volumes low, do your research on these people. Don't just send it to 100 people at once. Honestly, for me, I get the most ridiculous spam that clearly has nothing to do with what I need as a business. And in other
Yeah.
cases, they're like, hey, I heard through LinkedIn that you might be the CMO for Socket Labs. And it's like, well, yeah, you could have found that information anywhere. Like that is not personalization. Personalization is, especially for a person like me who is very active on social media. So like, you can see my posts on LinkedIn, what I care about, the things that I'm passionate about, find an in. Like I'm giving you all the secrets to what's happening in my mind. But even if I'm not, there are ways that you can research a company and say, oh, I noticed this thing on your website, and I've got this very unique angle for how you might be able to solve a problem that you've got, because I understand your business, right? So I would say don't send cold email, but I know you folks might have to. So if you do, just be very, very responsible about it.
Yeah. I, I see one more questions regarding the from Zishan
Mhm.
regarding what impacts the unsubscribe button along with the blue unsubscribe button. What all impact? I think you have already answered, but maybe you can summarize
Yeah,
it again.
we can summarize. Yeah, so that one is where, so there's a different, so it's tricky because there's many different types of one-click unsubscribe. So there's one that people have kind of been um, sort of using for quite some time, but this one is specifically referring to like RFC 8058, right? But really, this is that you basically enter some information into the headers of your email, and then after that, you really, not to say it magically shows up, but pretty much like shortly after you've implemented that, if your reputation is decent, you should see that unsubscribe link shows up very, very easily.
Got it. So that's it, Lauren. Thank you very much for such an insightful session. I hope this would help audience and they would start sending better emails and get their delivery sorted. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us as well. You can send your questions at inquiries@mainmodo.com, and we would be sharing this recording. We would be sharing some extra material for you to help and read as well. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks for
Yeah.
your time.
One last thing I'll mention. If you folks are in Email Geeks Slack channel, postmasters directly from Yahoo are in there. So if you have a specific question, first go read the documents because they're going to be sassy if you don't. But then if you have a specific follow-up question about one of those requirements, share that within the deliverability channel of Email Geeks Slack, and you'll get a response from somebody who's been doing this day and night, or directly from the postmaster of the mailbox provider you're trying to send to.
Great. So you have a way to reach out to Yahoo's postmaster as well, so that you can sort out your question. Cool. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks a lot for your time today. And thank you, audience. We know that you have joined from everywhere. It must be different times from different time zones. So thanks a
Yeah.
lot for everyone.
Thanks so much.